I'm going to go over a little bit about how I began in the business because it's all going to sort of marry into my presentation. So when I was in high school, right, I graduated when I was 17, and I went to work at a film trailer company in Hollywood, and they made teasers and trailers for all the big studios. So I got to see them do Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The same company owned a visual effects company, and they were doing Ken Russell's Altered States. So I sort of worked at both places a little bit so I can learn about the film business. I always wanted to learn a little bit about everything because my ultimate goal was to become a writer, producer, director. So, I dabbled in a little bit of acting back then. And, I starred in a McDonald's commercial for the very first chicken sandwich. And I never saw it. But it was a big deal. I was young. I was the kid behind the counter. So if anybody ever finds that commercial, send it to me. All right. Then I went to work on David Lynch's Dune for 4 years. And it was produced by Dino De Laurentiis and his daughter, Rafaela. And at the same time, they were producing Conan the Destroyer. So I worked on both films. Both films shot simultaneously at Estudios Churubusco in Mexico City. And so needless to say, it's where I really learned a lot about filmmaking and how things are done by just watching these masters do it. Next, I went to start my casting director career on Amazing Stories for Steven Spielberg. I was there for a season and a half. And I like to bring that up because what happened at age 26 when I finished working on Amazing Stories is when my own amazing story began. And all of a sudden, I always say I was just a valley boy who got up, went to work, and went out and had fun with my friends on the weekend. Never thought about anything out there in the universe. Wasn't into sci-fi. Wasn't into any of those types of things. And all of a sudden, I started getting visited in the dream state by 3 universal master teachers. And each time they visited me every night, I would just feel so enveloped in this unconditional love. And I would wake up and I'd think about it and I'd go back to sleep. And then I really wouldn't remember it until it happened again the next night. So this went on for 2 months. Then the next 2 months, I was with them in the dream. And then all of a sudden I woke up in the dream. And I realized that my actual essence was with them in their dimension. And that went on for 2 months. And then the last 2 months is the same 2 processes happened. But then when I opened my eyes, their astral bodies were at the foot of my bed. Now, I didn't think that this was strange or weird. I don't know why. I just felt that it was extreme love. And I did feel my spiritual sustenance, of course, start to raise at that time. And, then I just went through other processes where I was in their dimension and they sort of raised their hands up like this. And all of this white light with little golden flecks and stars and things was being fed into my body, and I was floating, and I felt all of the cells in my body wake up. And it was sort of like a capsulated. Remember those little contact pills with all the little, little dots inside? And they explained it to me that it's like that. It's like I would wake up over a small time frame, which actually ended up being 2 years, right? And it's just so that it doesn't affect your psyche. And they know how to they know when to pull back, and they know when to give you a little more when you're learning from them as well. So one of the processes was they ignited my light body, and I was no longer earthbound. So I started traveling throughout the universe, and I was going to other planets. And I can remember seeing all the different beings, and I can remember speaking before a giant group of beings, all that looked very different. And because they were very interested on what it was like to live on Earth, and very interested in duality, right? Because they're all fully conscious, and they're all masters and all of that. So everyone's very quite fascinated by it. Then I went through other types of waking up as well. And but I will say the one thing that was the most is during this waking process, I connected so deeply to the heart and soul of the universe, to source, that I began to see the beauty behind the creation of everything I saw, whether it was a person, a plant, an animal, a dog, and I would just start weeping. I mean, I sobbed really anywhere from 8 to 12 times a day. And I'm talking like a good long sob, because I couldn't believe how beautiful everything was. And so this was, I realized afterwards that this was actually a process to clear my vessel for what was to come. Now, after the 2 years of all these experiences, I was invited by a friend to go to Mount Shasta. She told me that we were going to stay with her friends who had a giant, gorgeous house. And when I got there, the wife said, you know, Craig, we're being told that you're supposed to stay in the big, beautiful apartment above our garage. Now, they had a giant garage, so it really was, it was just a giant room with a high ceiling. And it had a bed, a living room, a kitchen, dining room table. And so I went to bed that night, and I did a little meditation before I did, had a little tea, went to bed, woke up, my astral body lifted up out of my body to the ceiling, and I was consciously looking at my physical body sleeping on the bed. The next thing I notice is a 12-inch white glowing snake crawling across the covers, and it bit me right here, and my body twitched. And the second that happened, my body separated into two, right? Representative of my light and my dark, my masculine and my feminine. And at that time, I heard the voice of the great I am say, which still affects me to this day, because it's such a reverberation that it's such a deep cellular soul memory that I hope in sharing it with you today that it will help and it will affect you as well. So the I am said, you are, I am, we are, you are who you are, I am who you are who you are, and you are to be what we are in thee. And that just blew me away. I did wake up, and the next morning I decided to drive up to Mount Shasta to Panther Meadows. And while I was there, I meditated on the night's experiences. And as I was driving down the mountain, slowly, mind you, because they're so beautiful and there's the scent of the pine trees and everything. And all of a sudden, a 12-inch pure black snake slithered across the asphalt. And they had just made the asphalt black, so I really didn't see it until the last minute. And I ran it over and I killed it. And I stopped the car, and I realized that it was part of the experience from the night before, because we had the light with the glowing snake and the darkness, and then duality ending, right? So anyway, that was such an amazing thing that happened to me. I came home. One of my two of the three master teachers, there was one man and two women. The male said to me when I returned home, and mind you, when I meditated with them as well, I would get a click in the back of my neck, and it went just like that. And then they would be on my inner eyelids as if I'm looking at you right now, right? So I would have conversations with them, or sometimes they would just send me this emanation, pure love. And during this time of the 2 years, I wrote a book about all the experiences. I was lucky enough to have Shirley MacLaine as a mentor back then, who read the book and gave me her advice. But then my master teacher said, "What would you say if I told you you just wrote that book for yourself?" And I said, "Well, then I learned a lot about myself." And he said, "Well, now it's time to write the real books that you came here to write. And I want you to sit down. I want you to write and write and write. Don't stop. Don't edit. Continue to write until you can write no more." So back then, all there was regular typewriters, and I wasn't a fast typist. So I hand wrote everything out and did it that way. I didn't know what automatic writing was. I didn't know what channeling was. And at that time, they had built 3 portals in my 1-bedroom apartment. One was in the middle of the living room. So when I would sit at the kitchen table, because I just had a 1-bedroom, to write, I would see their energy forms come down, and then they would stand around me, and my body would literally ring with chills from anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, because their spiritual elevation was so high. And over time, that dissipated because I began to raise my own sustenance and going down my own spiritual path. And then that didn't happen. But then when like great masters would come, and I would feel them, then I would sob again for, 8 to 12 minutes each time. So the books that the master teacher was referring to are right over on the right. It's called The Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial Saga. There's 4 volumes available. Sylvia Brown did the foreword to the first. I met her just by happenstance, and we became friends. And she told me she wrote 65 books in her career, best-selling. And everyone wanted her to write their forewords. And she said, "I always refused because I didn't believe in their work, but I believe in yours. So I'm going to write your forewords." And she said, "You're only the 2nd person I've ever done that for." So I really felt extremely special with that. So I was, of course, I was seeing everything, of course, hearing it, saying they give me pictures, everything that's in my head. So I hired an artist who illustrated all of the beings, their planets, their ships, all of that. That is Tehran on the cover. And his ship is called the Oval Opal because it just looks like a gorgeous opal stones, just sort of flashing and moving around the ship as well. All right, so let me just show you a couple other pictures. So here's Dune and Conan, which I talked about. All right, now I'm going to ask you a question. There's Sting in his outfit, and there's me in Sting's outfit way back when I was a skinny mini. And so who wore it better? I don't know. Make your comments. All right, and then here's when I worked on Amazing Stories. They gave us these badges. One of the best times I ever had in my life working on that show, as you can imagine. This is Panther Meadows. And it is so beautiful. That's where I went to meditate. And, in the springtime, you get these gorgeous little springs going through it. And these are the 4 books. So book 2 is Waking Tehran. Book 3 is Tehran's Dossier. And book 4 is the Huroid Revolution and Other Warring Creatures. Now, I'm just going to give you a little insight on the book. I know Phil was talking about duality. These books are really based on duality because we're all trying to rise up and out of duality to become fully conscious so that our heart and mind work as one and we're no longer attached to the ego. So we're to service to humanity, service to universal humanity instead of service to self. And Tehran he was born dualistic. And they explained to me that every 200,000 births in the cosmos, there's a child is born dualistic in a fully conscious society. So this is so that they will maintain what it's like to be in the presence of a dualistic being so that they will have that experience, and for that dualistic being to also see what it's like to be around fully conscious beings as they work towards their Christendom as well. So the books 1 through 3, you go along the ride. I look at the reader as Tehran. You go through his journey on how he becomes fully conscious, and you can learn how to do it yourself as well. So that's what I love about those books. And it is also about the greater universal duality, especially in book 1, there's some mention, and in book 3, between Archangel Michael and Lucifer. And it is some of the most mind-blowing information that anyway you will ever have. All right, now let me just see. Now I think I think what's interesting, hang on, I don't know why that popped up, is the master teachers. I love this one thing that they told me as I was learning my lessons, and some of them were quite hard. They said the harder the lesson, the higher the evolution. So I always kept that in my mind, and I say, look, we all have to get through it. We all have to learn how to get through it. And if we do it in joy and in love, we'll get through it a whole lot quicker. And that was my process in the beginning, and I still do it to this day. Now I'm gonna give you just a little bit of an idea about how the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac came into being. My former book agents became a small publisher as well, and what they did is they married Red Wheel Wiser Books and MUFON Books. They created the MUFON book title, and what they did is then created an imprint for MUFON. So they called me and told me that they had an idea for a book called the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, and they knew that I was the right person to write it because, number one, of all the experiences that I've had, but also at age 26, I started studying all the contactee material where they were having face-to-face contact. I mean, from obscure books that are no longer around today. So I did contact those publishers, or if the contactee was alive and asked to, use the information, the publisher just wanted me to do a thumbnail review of each of the races and wanted me to fit in as many as possible. And so I'm a huge fan of Paul Hellyer, who is a former Canadian Minister of Defense. He has now passed away, but he was talking about extraterrestrial life and that they exist way, way before it was cool to do so, right? And he said he knew of 82 races visiting Earth. So I decided to see if I could fit in those 82 races. And I actually did. So that was my homage to him. Now, while so the intermediate publisher said, write up a proposal. They sent it to MUFON Red Will Weiser. They bought it 4 days later. I signed a contract and I was working on it the following week. Now, while I'm working on the book, I got a phone call from a genealogist in Canada, and she explained that she was my fourth or fifth cousin on my mother's father's side and was looking for some information, and I gave it to her. And I said, hey, have you, can you find somebody for me? I said, my mother told me when I was 12 that that my father is my stepfather. By the way, this is my mother way back then, and this is my stepfather, who I consider my father because he's the man that raised me, and I wouldn't trade him for the world. And anyway, I said my biological father's name is Fred Warner Vero, and that's all I know. My mom, something happened way back when. She ended up becoming pregnant, and she raised me with her sister for the first year until she married my stepfather. And anyway, she said, sure, I can find anybody. So long story short, she found him. In 2006, he had passed away, so there was no way I was going to meet him. But she told me where he was buried at Forest Lawn. And I went down there the next morning, talked to the front desk, and they gave me the name of the person that called to pick up his body. I looked the man up online. He lived right around the corner from me. How's that for synchronicity? He was 74 at the time. I wrote him a letter, put my picture in there. 2 days later, I got a call from his son. And his son said, my dad got your letter. And I said, oh, was he friends with Fred? Because he had a different last name. And he said, no, it's actually his half brother. And I said, you're kidding. And I said, so you're my cousin? And he goes, well, I guess so. He said, we find this a bit strange. Fred never mentioned you, anything like that. But, but you look just like him, right? And so here is me when I was young, and there's Fred when he was about the same age. He was in the Air Guard there, I believe. My uncle told me that he really wanted to be in the Air Force, and so their mom, they have the same mom, actually signed papers for him to go in early into the Air Guard. So anyway, I make a dinner date with my newfound cousin and uncle, 3 hours long. I said, just tell me everything about him. And about an hour into the conversation, he says, so, when he turned 18, he went into the Air Force. And he said, oh, and by the way, he was in Project Blue Book. And I mean, my face literally fell. I mean, never in a million years would I have guessed that, right? And my uncle has 3 sons, 2 of which hounded him for UFO information, but they said he just wouldn't talk. My uncle told me he was very secretive. And even when he got married, before he met my mom, he never even told them that he was married. So I found that strange too. But anyway, let's see here. So my cousin, over getting together with their family over Christmas, gave me his badge that Fred gave him, his patch that he wore on his arm. So he went all the way up to becoming a first sergeant. And I did get all of his military papers. I've had other people high in the military look at it and they say his numbers don't match normal numbers. There's something highly strange, and I don't think anyone would know unless it was a colonel. And anyway, but it did show, all the places that he was based, which is what my uncle told me. And we know that he was in intelligence as well. So now here's the cool thing is that here my biological father is working for Project Blue Book, which is the U.S. Air Force study on UFOs that started in 1952 and was decommissioned in January of 1970, which investigated over 11,000 sightings. Its main study was to determine if UFOs were a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. And now here I am writing books for MUFON, which is a US-based nonprofit comprised of civilian volunteers who study reported UFO sightings. Now, when Fred left the Air Force and came here, he ultimately became the head of construction at Warner Brothers. So I'm thinking to myself, here we both are kind of doing the same work with MUFON and Project Blue Book, only one is in the public and one is secretive. And here he is working in the film business at Warner Brothers, and I'm working as a casting director. Now, I sort of found a few films that I know he worked on way back then. They didn't put credits for construction on IMDb at all. But at one point, we literally were, I was at Universal and he was at Warner Brothers, which are back to back. And also living out here in the Santa Clarita Valley, him and his wife, who he married a few years after him and my mother broke up, they lived around the corner from me in several houses, as well as my uncle living around the corner from me for well over 30 years. So, I mean, it blows me away. Now, here's the other interesting thing is my uncle ran the motion picture home. And during the time that he was there, and Fred was there the last 8 years of his life, living there, my mother and I used to go visit an actress who was one of my favorites and my dear friend, Mabel King. And Mabel starred in Amazing Stories episode, which was one of my favorites, but that's how I met her. But she starred as Evelina in The Wiz on the TV show What's Happening. And so we were there at the motion picture home at the same time they were as well. So again, just all these coincidences and, which I find just fascinating. All right, now, so here we go. So there's Project Blue Book, MUFON. So now we're going to talk about the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac. I'm going to just, because I know we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to give you guys a little thumbnail review. I will be speaking at the MUFON Symposium in July. And I'm going to be giving an extended speech there. And talking with Alan earlier, I'm hoping to show the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, the documentary there as well. And so if you know you're going to be there, please do that. And I'm trying to see if I can get it into one other place that is around that time as well. So we'll see about that. Now, what's interesting is the Alpha Centaurians know of 1,019,000 civilizations on other worlds. The Urantia book says that Earth's registry number in the universe is 5,342,482,586 337,666. There's that number, right? Could that number have come from the registry number? I don't know. Anyway, so it kind of just puts the universe into perspective. And so there are 7 super universes, and with each ovum of the 7 super universes, there are 700,000 local universes. So you can imagine that creation in beings and intelligence and everything is so diverse that we couldn't even think about what's out there in the great big universe. Now, I did meet with a man who was very high up in intelligence, and he told me that very fact as well. And he said, if you think something up and you think it's weird, it most likely exists. So they have seen many, many different things. All right, so let's talk about the grays, the Zeta humans, and the positive races. Now, in the realm of grays, how they like it to be told is grays are the negative ones. The Zeta humans, which look similar to them, and other possible positive races, they prefer, like the Zeta humans who are from Zeta Reticuli, they prefer to be called Zeta humans. If they're from Orion, they prefer to be called Orion humans. So that's where, we sort of separate it all. All right, now, here we go. So here's some of the positive races here. I'll go over the pictures in a minute. So there's all kinds of grays and other humans that look like them with different agendas. The ones that are benevolent prefer to be called, like I said, Zeta humans. Most of them are from Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2, Orion and Cetus. Zeta humans participate in consciousness raising programs on Earth, as other enlightened races do. The Zetas work with star seeds in the physical and the astral to elevate their consciousness in various ways. Now, star seeds are fully conscious beings that, of their own free will, incarnated into a dualistic body to elevate global consciousness. So they have been given permission, their soul, prior to incarnating, for visits from races of the positive galactic kingdom. Now, because they also too are creating hybrid races. One of those races is called the seventh ray race, and they will be mixed with donor Earth DNA and extraterrestrial DNA, all of human origin. And those children will be brought up and they will learn all about duality. And when the consciousness shifts over, they will then come down and live in all the various cities all over the earth and be teachers, counselors for the people who are living there. And all right, some people have been brought on board crafts, positively, by the way, to interact with subliminal machines that flashes pictures of the earth and what could happen if something isn't done. I'm sure that is resonating with a lot of you listening to this right now. This experience also happened to me. It's happened to many, many, many abductees, contactees that I've spoken with. Now, they can also work on your auric field to raise the body and mind vibration. That was also done with me through all of my experiences. And then, just like I had my astral body done, when that person is at the spiritual equilibrium where they can ignite their light body, then they too can start going and learning from other civilizations. Now, A lot of you know that I've done I was good friends with Dr. Frank Stranges, who wrote Stranger at the Pentagon, the Valiant Thor story, on Victor 1, his craft, which holds 200 people. Teal, one of his vice commanders, she teaches night classes. She brings people up in their astral body and teaches them about the universe. And also, she teaches beings from all over our universe and other universes about Earth, because she's been here for a very, very long time. And she loves learning and teaching about duality, because it is not really that common up there. It's common in the negative races, of course, but not in the most of the fold. All right. Now, okay, so on the darker side, let's get that picture up. There we go. So on the darker side, malevolent greys abduct humans against their will. They rape them for their DNA. Some of these races lost their spirituality, dove more into science, and over time could no longer reproduce. They started cloning themselves, and then after a time began dying out. So they could no longer ascend into the higher realms. So they chose humans because we're DNA royalty, because all of the civilizations that have lived here from the stars left their DNA on the planet. It is all inside all of us, right? And I'm telling you, there's going to be a day that 23andMe and my heritage, you're going to be able to do it. And they're going to say, you're from the Pleiades, you're from Sirius, you're from Vega, you're from Lyra, you know, or a combination of all of those things. Anyway, so they need those ascension codes to rebuild their bodies and ascend. The difference is that they are not asking for permission. I mean, there was talk of when a treaty was signed between them, I believe during the Eisenhower administration, that they were allowed to pick up street people and things like that to just, you know, take samples and things like that. And but then that just didn't happen. They totally went against the treaty. And I'm not going to go into the horrors of some of the things that I've been told. All right, now this guy on the right, the tall, skinny one, those are called the Orons. They're a new race that have been abducting people. And, you know, they are interdimensional, and those eyes are actually, they can see interdimensionally as well. So, all right, let's move on. All right, we're going to go to reptilians. All right, so pretty much the reptilians hail from Bellatrix, Orion, Sirius, Lacerta, and the Draconis constellations. The reptilian race is primarily the Draconians. They're master hybridists. So they create a myriad of races from all types of DNAs, especially ones with aggressive behavioral attitudes. And then they train them from children to become military fighters and put them in their military. They train their own children or boys beginning at age 6, because they're going to become the generals in those. And only the strong will survive, right? So anyway, reptilians literally want to rule the universe. They feel they were here first and that the universe is theirs. They're the fiercest tyrannical warriors known to any civilization. They're excellent navigators of universal territories. It is said that they have conquered many planets secretly from the inside. They're master manipulators and puppet puppet masters due to their billions of years of evolution. And they alter lesser evolved civilization gene pools to dumb them down and control them from afar for resources and underground territory, among other things. You get my drift. The population not knowing that they exist or that they control them. Draconians alter the perfection of the human body, including the mind, hence thought patterns become degenerative, and human right to ascend into the grandeur of the universe becomes inactive. They do not look for immediate results. They plan everything out carefully to guarantee success. Time to them is their friend. Now, they also know how to lock human chakras so that you can no longer evolve and create your 5 Christ chakras. And we're not talking about religion, we're talking about the Christed. And because when you start to evolve and you're moving through your duality, your 5 Christ chakras drop down in the body and they move in between your other ones. And then over time, as you are achieving your Christendom, they actually merge into those other chakras as well. And all 7 merge into the heart chakra. It's really beautiful. All of that is explained, I believe, in Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial, Book 2, with charts and everything. All right. Now, not to worry, the angelic corps actually has their eye on the Draconians. They just wait for them to make an infraction and then they are apprehended, but they are crafty creatures. All right. Now, and here's some positive reptilians. The green lizardian is from Lacerta. Some of them are from, varying things around Lacerta. Some of them are from Orion, etc. Now let's talk about hybrids. All right. There we go. I'll explain who these beings are in a minute. Okay, so hybrids can come into being in many unusual ways. Now, I knew a female hybrid whose father worked for the military, and the military and the extraterrestrials were exchanging DNA between cosmic civilizations that they were in contact with. So this father who worked in the military had his wife's embryo altered with 3 different kinds of extraterrestrial DNA while she was pregnant. And it's not for them to look like those other races. It's more for the intelligence part, just so you know. They had a girl and she was very unique looking. Her skin was really this sort of translucent white. She had aqua blue eyes and her hands were shaped just a little bit differently. You wouldn't notice unless you were staring at them, though. And she was completely into all things extraterrestrial. She really, she was a dear friend of mine, and she really did have the kindest benevolence that you'll ever see. When I went to visit her before she passed, she didn't want to go through any more treatments for cancer. She said, I just want to go home. I want to go home. And I can look after everybody from there. And anyway, she really wanted to be with her cosmic family again. I know everybody can identify with that who connects into this. Other hybrids that are out and talking about it are Vivian Chauvet, whose father is Octurian, Jacqueline Smith, who's a Mantis hybrid. She's mentioned in Barbara Lamb's book about hybrids. And both of those women are actually in my upcoming documentary, and they're going to talk about their hybridization as well. Very fascinating. We have a great hybrid section on that. Now, also, hybrids can come into being with the fetus being altered by etDNA or injected into the body when the child is usually around 5 years old, but it can be done at any age, really. They can also, dependent on what the starseed has come here to do, they could also place advanced consciousness into your mental faculties to connect to them, or in your auric field to absorb over time and into your thoughts. So in your mental faculties, you might start to feel that you're becoming more telepathic, you're becoming more aware of the beauty around you. You're now looking into what is out there in the universe, and your thoughts and things change. For the body, it's also to help your body adjust to these new thought forms that are coming in, because I've seen many a star seed go down the alcoholic trail and smoking trail because they couldn't handle all the energy coming in. So, I remember I saved one woman who was actually here. She was married and she had 2 daughters. And at the time, a lot of the starseeds were being shown their children back home. And I remember that distinctly. And she called me up and she was just weeping. And she said, I want to go home. I'm going to commit suicide. And I told her, I said, you can't go home. You can't commit suicide. You have a family here. Think about what that would do to them. But also, if you did that, your contract states that you actually have to come here and do the work. So you would just be put into another reincarnation cycle, therefore delaying your full return home.